Karate friends, welcome to Classics in Color, your weekly dive into some of the ancient world's wackiest facts. I'm Marc Graves, and today we'll be checking out a topic that's a little bit different from what I usually cover, but I'm super excited for it. I think it's really interesting. We're going to be hearing from Cicero's own mouth, him telling you that sometimes it's okay to tell a giant whopper if it's going to get the emotional response that you want from your audience. So before we get started, I just want to give you a quick reminder that it is the end of the month, so keep an eye out for that bonus video on Patreon. It's going to have to do with wine. And then I'll also have the review for Rome Season 2 out for you guys soon. So thanks, and let's get started. Let's start off by just really quickly taking a look at what did the Greeks think about objective truth? Because you might have the idea that they all agree with Plato, because Plato is obsessed with objective truth, with the perfect form, that we should all be spending all our time searching for this objective truth. But not everybody agreed with him entirely. Like most things, it's a little more complicated than that. So let's actually take a look at a line of poetry from Hesiod's Theogony. So Hesiod is a very old poet. Some scholars argue he's even older than Homer. I have no idea, but he's very old and very important. And he wrote the Theogony, which is a poem that's a collection of stories, for the most part, about the gods. And in the introduction, there is this very famous and enigmatic line that there's so much debate about, but is really interesting. So let's take a look at that. So the Muses have just descended to Hesiod, and they're going to help teach him how to write this poem, this Theogony, and they introduce themselves a little bit. So they say, "We know how to speak many lies as good as truths, and if we want many truths." So there is tons of debate about this line, but my particular favorite theory that explains what the heck is going on here influenced how I just translated that. So I went with, the Muses know how to tell you truth, but they also know how to tell you lies. But it's not just lies, it's lies that are as good as truth. The idea being that they know how to tell you stories that, while not objectively true, still have lots of truth and meaning and utility in them. So not actually that complicated or crazy of a theory, I don't think. But I bring it up because I think it illustrates really well how the Greeks understand that a lot of their myths are probably not completely factually true, that Zeus may or may not have gotten up to all the shenanigans that he does in myth, but that doesn't mean that they don't believe there is a Zeus out there somewhere, and it also doesn't mean that they can't find a lot of meaning and enjoyment and truth in all the stories that are told about him. So I think it just illustrates how well the Greeks understand that there can be a lot of value in things that aren't completely objectively, factually true, and help us understand the kind of the nuance of their mindset a little bit better. So if you had asked a younger and stupider and more innocent me about Aristotle and Cicero, I would have given you my mental image of them, which was these great men, these perfect pillars of virtue and the constant pursuit of objective truth. And then I went and majored in classics and realized, no, they're pretty human, like the rest of us, and that can be a little disappointing, but it can also make things more interesting. So let's start off with Aristotle. So Aristotle writes a ton about using emotions to manipulate and persuade people in, say, political speeches or debates or in courtroom cases, that sort of thing. And it's a lot. I can't give it all to you in this video, so please go read that if you want to form your own opinion. So in this video, I'm just gonna kind of have to sum up some things for you / give you some really long quotes to look at. But to sum up, what he generally says is that, one, yeah, objective truth is great and all, but it's practically not what people are using. Other people are using emotions all the time. If we only went on objective truth, then we would never have anything to talk about, and that would be boring because Greeks love arguing about stuff. And then finally, the point that I kind of find the most interesting, he says that, yeah, objective truth is really, really awesome. And therefore, if you are correct, if you happen to have the objective right answer and you can't persuade anybody else that you are right, then you're the dum-dum. The problem is you, not the truth. So let's take a look at the full quote of what he says about that. "Rhetoric is useful because the true and the just are naturally superior to their opposites, so that if decisions are improperly made, they must owe their defeat to their own advocates, which is reprehensible. Further, in dealing with certain persons, even if we possess the most accurate scientific knowledge, we should not find it easy to persuade them by the employment of such knowledge. For scientific discourse is concerned with instruction, but in the case of such persons, instruction is impossible. So you can see he's saying objective truth is great, but truth doesn't equal persuading people, and you gotta know how to do both. And he then defends this position because he says that lots of people think that studying this art of persuasion and not just relying on the truth is dangerous, it's bad, because to be fair, lots of people have persuaded other people to do terrible things. Persuasion is a powerful and dangerous tool. But he points out that just because something is powerful and dangerous doesn't mean it's automatically bad. Swords are powerful and dangerous, but they can be used for good or bad. They're just a tool, and it depends on how you use them. So enough of me paraphrasing, let's look at what he says. It would be absurd if it were considered disgraceful not to be able to defend oneself with the help of the body, but not as disgraceful as far as speech is concerned, whose use is more characteristic of man than that of the body. If it is argued that one who makes an unfair use of such faculty of speech may do a great deal of harm, this objection applies equally to all good things except virtue, and above all to those things which are most useful, such as strength, health, wealth, generalship, etc. For as these, rightly used, may be of the greatest benefit, so wrongly used they may do an equal amount of harm. Then I think he has a very realistic take on the fact that even if you have truth and you have persuasion, realistically, you can only get so far. So he says, it is not the function of medicine to restore a patient to health, but only to promote this end as far as possible. For even those whose recovery is impossible may be properly treated. It is further evident that it belongs to rhetoric to discover the real and apparent means of persuasion, just as it belongs to dialectic to discover the real and apparent syllogism. For what makes the sophist is not the faculty, but the moral purpose. And I think that last line is the real kicker of his argument, that in his opinion, if you have the right intentions, the right ends, if you will, then that justifies any means or manipulating whatever emotions you want. And Cicero also wrote a whole work called De Rhetorica that's about rhetoric, and book 2 is, for the most part, about emotions and how to manipulate them in people and how to persuade them, because he, for the most part, agrees with Aristotle. He says that, yeah, it'd be great if we could all just use facts and truth, that'd be awesome, but everything's become so corrupt, everybody's so used to manipulating emotions and having their emotions manipulated that it's too late, too far gone. We all got to jump on the bandwagon and do what works. And then he has this whole list of techniques to use and things to be aware of. He goes kind of into a little bit of human psychology, how our emotions work, so that you can better understand how to manipulate them. It's really interesting, but again, it's really long. So if you're interested, definitely go read the whole thing, but I'm just going to kind of be summing up and pointing out what I thought were some of the highlights. So he starts off by saying, don't be obviously fake, which I find kind of funny because it reminds me of when podcasters talk about needing to be contrivedly uncontrived, that they need to come across as really genuine, spur of the moment, totally legit. But obviously there's skill and planning and editing that goes into all of these things, so it's never completely just raw. And Cicero's basically making the same point, that I'm going to teach you all these techniques of how to be cool and persuasive and get people excited or angry or whatever you need, etc. But you don't want to be obvious about it. You don't want people to be able to watch you giving your speech and point out when you're being manipulative. So I think that's pretty interesting. So he has 3 little sub-points to that. One being that you need to make it seem like your speech is unplanned. So don't come in and read off your note cards, even if you spend a lot of time writing it all out and planning every piece of it very carefully and memorizing it. You want to come out and give the impression that this is just coming straight from your heart. You haven't thought about this at all. And then second, you want to emote. You want to be emotional, because if you're not feeling, then nobody else in the audience is going to feel anything either. And it's, again, going to come across like you're just reading or reciting your note cards. You want to make it seem like you're feeling these things, and that is what is generating these words out of your mouth, not this careful little plan that you came up beforehand. And then finally, he says that the best way to sell this is to have a really great sort of cut-off retort or slap back to the audience. So if somebody is grumbling or trying to argue with you, if you can have a really good comeback to that, then that little moment of genuine improv is going to sell the impression that this whole thing is genuine and off the cuff. And he has tons of other techniques that you can use as well, so definitely read the whole thing. But some of those are that, one, you want to cultivate your own personal image. So you don't want to be somebody that everybody hates because they won't listen to you. And you also don't want to go too far the other way and be some sort of saint or goody-goody, because then everyone's going to hate you, they're going to be jealous of you, and they're also not going to take you seriously. So you got to find that perfect golden middle. And then also, he spends a long time discussing humor. So being really clever and witty can really win people over to your side. And he thinks that this is actually so important, so powerful, that you should use a good joke even if you have to lie a little bit. So in the next passage, he just gave an example of a joke that he thought was really funny and effective, and then adds some little notes to that. So let's check that out. It was a spicy story, but every word of your own fabrication. You wound up by relating that the letters MMLLL were inscribed on every wall in Terracina, and that some ancient inhabitant answered when you asked what they meant, Mordacius Memmius Lacertes Largus' limb. You see how plainly, how graceful, choice, and well-befitting an orator is a jest of this sort. Whether you have some truth you can relate, which for all that may be sprinkled with fibs, or whether you are only fabricating. So I don't know about you guys, but that is just wild to see Cicero saying, yeah, if you got a good joke and you got to lie to make it work, go for it. If you need to get that law passed or you need to win that case, no holds barred. So that is crazy to me, but very interesting. So again, I barely scratched the surface of this topic in this video, but I hope you enjoyed it, thought it was interesting. Special thank you to all of you for watching, and to subscribers and to Patreon members. I hope to see all of you again next week. Karate.